Today, we are very honored to be here with Brad Reedy, Ph.D., owner and executive clinical director of Evoke Therapy Programs. Dr. Brad Reedy graduated magna cum laude with his BS in family science, followed by an MS and Ph.D. in marriage and family therapy. Dr. Reedy's research and clinical experience includes parenting issues, family trauma, treatment with sexual abuse victims, domestically violent offenders, with adults, adolescents, substance abuse issues, eating disorders, patients, sexual perpetrators, attachment issues, developmental psychology, and children suffering with grief and loss. Dr. Reedy works with a number of populations, including students with dual diagnosis, gifted intelligence, and he is on the board of the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs in the Utah Department of Child and Family Services. Dr. Reedy is also the author of two books. It could be more than two books. However, I do have a copy of The Journey of the Heroic Parent, as we can see here, and The Audacity to Be You. And with all fairness, I am getting through The Journey of the Heroic Parent, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's just hitting home on so many levels. And what I wanted to start off with is just a little bit about the Evoke program. I did have the opportunity to meet, I believe it was Matt. We had a dinner when I was on the Southern Utah Program Alliance, and I was able to meet some of the staff. And I was just super impressed with their level of expertise, their willingness to talk about the program. And that's why I had reached out. I just think that you guys are doing great work. So I thought we could maybe start a little bit about kind of the offerings of the program. I am on the East Coast, but I'm an educational consultant with about 20 years of kind of the lens of special ed. So I like the empowerment work that you're doing. But in the last 3 years, I've gotten into therapeutic consulting. And my hope for doing this podcast, as well as others, is to allow families to kind of see, who you are, start to explain a little bit. And then I was hoping to do a highlight on the program. So I'm going to let you kind of just talk a little bit about the Evoke program. And then I thought we could just have a discussion about, I kind of wanted to point out some of the things that I'm really responding to in your book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent. We could just kind of have a discussion about that as well.
Sure. I think what I could share is kind of the in the context of what we provide is kind of the arc of my thinking about this field, these issues. I really come into this to Evoke with the background, not only of the education, like you mentioned, but also my own personal experience as a child who struggled. And because of that, I have that perspective about what it means to be in a family system, the work that my parents needed to do, some of which they did do, some of which they didn't do, of course, and how that could help me. So I found wilderness therapy by accident, treating young adults and adolescents by accident in the context of small group living outside in nature. And I just saw it to be a really, really powerful and provocative intervention. It was what I like to say is wilderness therapy works because you're not walking through the front door and addressing the issues head on. It's addressed in the context of the experiential therapy. I've never seen anything so rich as a delivery method for psychotherapy. I think the thing that's probably most misunderstood about wilderness therapy, especially ours, is the level of clinical sophistication in education. And primarily for us, that means attachment theory. What I love, Maureen, it's not just attachment theory and understanding attachment styles, but it's understanding that how the therapist feels and regards the client is really the magic pixie dust. If I approach you with non-judgment, with compassion, what I like to say is whatever symptoms you have as a mother, as a father, as a child, I assume you came by them honestly, that somehow they serve to protect you from some kind of trauma, small or big trauma in your life. And I think that shift in a lens for me, not just with treating the kids, but treating the parents, that whatever limitations a parent might have, that it also comes very honestly from their own childhood trauma, that they deserve the same kind of respect and compassion that the child does. And that kind of gentle entry into the family system through the non-judgmental attachment lens is really what we hang our hats on. And I believe this. I believe Evoke is the wilderness program where adolescents and young adults come out for approximately 2 months and do therapy outside and live in small groups is incredibly powerful. But of course, over the years, we've added the podcasts, the books that you've mentioned. We now have an intensive therapeutic program where the non-identified patient comes out for about a week and does their own work and sees
Right.
how their own childhood is impacting the dilemmas that they're struggling with today. So that program I'm very proud of also. I say that it's not, we were the first wilderness program to really put an emphasis on family work back in 1998 when we opened. We changed the landscape of wilderness therapy back then. And I think a lot of people do a lot of family work. I think what I'm most proud of is not that we have a robust family support program and services for parents, but that we are effective at reaching people who otherwise wouldn't be reached. That we can, again, that I can talk to a father through a podcast who might never go to psychotherapy, but after listening to a couple of podcasts, I often hear fathers reach out to me, men reach out to me, for example, saying, if I knew therapy was going to be like this, I would have come a long time ago. So that's what I love about our program is that we see everybody, including the non-identified patient, the parent who's struggling with boundaries. We see them as in the same way that we would look at any of our clients, which is compassion, understanding, patience, love, acceptance, non-judgment. And I think that's what draws people in. Also the fact that I think what I've also seen happen in our program is if you're transparent and you realize as a speaker and a writer, I realize that I make all the mistakes that I teach about. When an expert lets you know that they're on the journey with you, it's not a top-down experience where you're feeling condescended to. You're actually, that's part of the invitation is, look, I'm on this journey too. I dent my children too. I struggle with boundaries. I struggle with all these things. And that's a much more inviting context to step into than here's what's right. You're doing it wrong. You're causing the problem. You need to get it fixed. So that's kind of the overview.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say in the book, I love the fact that, sometimes because we work in this field, maybe there's this feeling of like our kids should be these models when really it's like, oh my God, I have two boys. They're both really struggling. And, I noticed as I was reading the book, it's like, wow, I have so much shame over that. Like I'm supposed to be this perfect parent, but yet one struggling with significant mental illness, the other one struggling with like learning challenges, struggling to get through college. And despite being like a really open person, I really struggle with like sharing that because it's almost as if they'll see me or potentially view me as less credible. Like, well, why would we hire you if like,
Right.
So it's almost like your book allowed me permission to say, it's okay because their struggles are exactly that. They're struggles. And it doesn't, I don't have to like say that's all because of me and my, potentially maybe it was bad parenting. It's like, no, that's not what it was.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so great to hear because that's the goal is to, and invite people into the work and the real barriers in psychotherapy are shame and guilt. If we didn't have shame and guilt, it would just be education. And
Right.
when I train therapists, which I spend a lot of time doing, what I say to them is you have to account for the resistance that comes out of shame and guilt because that's the real barrier in psychotherapy. If there were no guilt or shame for the mistakes and the fallibility that we all embody, we would just be learning and growing kind of grace upon grace. And so that attending to that and realizing that we all have that, even maybe even more pointedly, those of us who are in this field have, I think that's a gift that somebody gave to me. And I want to give that same gift to other people, that gift of allowing us all to be human.
Right. And, like there was a few references to kind of almost like codependency as well as, some references to kind of like 12-step work or whatever, which, I could really relate to. But, I have to say, I think that the shame and guilt and, one of the things you had talked about was, part of our job is to be empathetic towards our children, which, okay, absolutely. But then the other part is to hold them accountable for their actions. And that's, I personally, that's where I'm falling short. And I think
Right.
probably a lot of families or parents that come to you, it's that accountability. And just I'm divorced, so it's like I almost feel like I just take like, oh, I've ruined them because I divorced their dad, and it's like, but it's
Right.
not true. And I have to continue to question, that's, you're telling yourself that, but it is not the truth.
I think that's so wise. I think that a lot of us, you and I were talking just before you press record about that mantra that I talk about what other people think about you is none of your business. That
Right.
idea that I borrowed from my interaction in the 12 step world. But part of it is when you grow up in a family as a child, believing that your parents' anger or sadness or frustration or happiness is your responsibility. Then you grow up believing that other people's feelings are the truth about you. And so when we then look at our child, I talked about this in the Journey of the Evoke Parent. There's a book I read where it said in previous generations, children worried about what their parents think about them. And today, parents worry about what their children think about them. The point I make is it's the same person doing the worrying. They've just grown up and had children. So when you grow up believing that somebody else's anger is yours to hold, then when our children get angry or sad or hurt or upset with us, it compromises us in the same way it did when we were younger. And so part of that healing, there's a Buddhist saying that says to grow up, you have to kill your parents, metaphorically, of course. Spiritually, you have to release yourself from their expectations and their ideas about who you should be. And that work, that's the key to being a more effective parent. We have to go back and let go of that original wound, the believing that we have to be something for somebody else,
Right.
so that we can just be ourselves with our children. And like you say, hold them accountable by having boundaries. But to do that, we have to face that dragon. We have to face the dragon of shame and guilt to be able to say no, or I won't, or this is the limit and you can't go any farther.
Right. Right. I also think it was really important to kind of talk about your son. Like originally you kind of made like certain threats, like, shape up or you're going to have to go to wilderness. And then ultimately he
Yeah.
goes to wilderness, and like
Yeah.
admitting that, I just think it's huge. Like I said, it was freedom for me. And allowed me to feel like, when I'm talking to my clients, like it's okay. It's not like an overshare. It's more like I just
Yeah.
walked this walk with you from when they were like first born. This is
Right.
obviously why I get into the work and change career paths, and like why I fight so hard for these families. Like, I think there was something that you had said about like having a struggling child. It does allow you to really have that compassion. And it's like, despite doing this work for about 20 years, I still wake up, jump out of bed, and it's like, it's on. Let's do
Yeah.
this.
Right.
And have so much energy and compassion for those families. Not only like looking at it from like certain systems have to change, but also just maybe it was like this feeling of like, I wish someone else was there for me, like when I was going through
Right.
this.
I mean, the beautiful part, me too. I mean, that's really where the work comes from, is because I've struggled and because I've hurt so much in my life. I've been hurt so much in my life, and I know what's helped to heal and soothe me. Now I know what to give other people. And it's not, when you become a therapist, sometimes young therapists pride themselves. I even read this email blast from some company that does virtual coaching, and they said, we don't sugarcoat things. And I thought to myself, I'm sure you're really proud of that, but remember, you're dealing with people, even though on the outside they might look rough with their symptomology, you're dealing with wounded people. You're dealing with hurt
Exactly.
children. And
Exactly.
so when in Les Mis, I talk about this in the second book, when Victor Hugo tells the story in Les Mis where the bishop gives Jean Valjean the silver candlesticks after he's caught robbing, and he shows this grace, and then Jean Valjean, the main character, goes on to spend his life in service, generous service, and love of everybody else. That's what changes us. But we're so afraid to receive that grace or to give that grace because we've been taught by our parents that if we're given grace by our culture, that if we're given grace, we'll just become crazy, hedonistic, self-serving people. When in reality, it is the grace that heals the shame. It is the grace that heals the wounded child. And when the wounded child is healed, the wounded child then has more love and generosity to give to the world. And I think that great paradox that Mr. Fred Rogers, for example, exhibited with children, that kind of gentle grace, that's what heals people, not punching the defense in the nose and saying you're narcissistic or borderline or you're codependent. It's saying, where were you hurt? Where were you scared? What are you afraid of? I can sit and listen to that empathically and even relate to it on a real human level.
Right. Right. And I would just say too, just going back to the family work that you were saying, you can't just, heal a family with one member. So
yeah,
as the student is there doing the work and making these changes, it really has to be a family type approach to the healing, because, it's like with an addict or alcoholic, going back to that same environment. If nothing changes, nothing changes.
that's
So,
right.
for certain kids going back into the home, it's like, we're going to do things different. And this is what it's going to look like. And we don't have to do
Right,
it this way because we've done it that way, all of
right,
these years. We can be strong enough to make these changes. So I do like the fact, and I mean, a lot of programs do family work, but I think you guys do it at a level that is really very kind of inclusive, comprehensive,
right.
and then, the amount of like podcasts, like just saying like, okay, if you don't know what wilderness is about, if that's
Right.
scary for you, like let's dip our feet in a little bit.
Sure. It's a really non-intrusive, non-threatening way to just take the first step, right? To listen to a
Right.
podcast or to even pick up a book in privacy. And again, I'm not about my audience on the podcast is about, we're going to hit 3 million listens, by the way, in about 3 weeks.
Awesome.
And 88% of those are females, which is interesting. Um, 88% of my social media following are females. And I think women are more apt to seek help from therapists, whereas we men have been socialized that to ask to help is the worst thing in the world, right? It's the most dramatically horrible thing for a man to ask for help. And so when a father can listen to, or a man can listen to, or a mother for that matter, can listen to a podcast in the privacy of their own office and start to feel the sweetness of the healing and the non-judgment of the healing process, then they'll take that second step. I teach therapists this all the time. The goal in psychotherapy is to encourage somebody to keep going on their
Right.
journey, whatever that looks like,
Right.
and to let them know that they don't have to do it alone, but everybody has work to do. The wisest people, I think about Ram Dass, the guru Ram Dass, who passed away a couple of years ago. The wisest people will talk about their fallibility. I heard the Dalai Lama speak at the University of Utah in 2018 or 19. The whole talk was about how flawed he was all throughout it, because that's what happens when you get healthy is you can, like the subtitle of my second book, you can learn to love your horrible, rotten self. And the great paradox is that it's only when we accept ourselves can we truly change and transform. And that's not intuitive. That's not instinctual for most people. And like you said, that's not what even popular therapy and culture teaches. When a program lists as their number one on their attributes of their coaches, that we don't sugarcoat things, they're just preparing for the fact that they're going to be unkind and judgmental and harsh, instead of saying, how can I get this person drawn into the love and the healing, instead of just make my point and point out the defense and saying, I teach therapists this. You don't point out when someone's justifying in therapy. You don't say, hey, you're justifying or you're rationalizing. What you try to do in therapy, because those are all defenses. A justification is a defense. A rationalization is a defense. And a defense is in place because a person feels unsafe and threatened by its definition. So what you try to do in psychotherapy is be safe enough that they don't need the defense anymore. When I have clients in the wilderness program or in our intensive program start to confess secrets about themselves that they wouldn't tell other therapists, it means that I've done my job. It
Right.
means that I've created a context where the defense is not needed anymore because I'm a safe person to talk to.
Right. That's the point. You feel safe. And I
Right.
also would kind of maintain that we don't sugarcoat it. it's kind of like we're going to approach this in a very direct way. It's like the client that's coming in, they already know that they're broken, that
Oh my
they're,
gosh. That's
it's
so
like,
true.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like in AA, it's like, don't you know that I already think I'm the worst person in the world?
That's right. That's
So the
right.
old school, like, come in, shut up, you have nothing to say. It's like, well,
Yeah.
you know what? I already know that I'm worthless. Like, if someone could just like be a little bit kind to me, God, that would go such a long way.
Oh my gosh. Just hearing you say that, it almost brings an emotion to my face because um, Jamie Gill, my therapist, who's written about, I lost count, 30 or 40 books. One of her recent books, there's a line in it that I love. She said, it's important to point out, she says, that safety is the treatment, not the precursor to treatment. Safety is the treatment. That
Right.
is the repairing medicine, the repairing experience that someone has. If you can walk into a therapist's office and tell them something about yourself that you feel horrible about, and they can respond with compassion, gentleness, and understanding, healing is happening,
Right.
right? Just like you said. Absolutely. We
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I think for me, people that are listening, I know this sounds strange. I love, like I said, the first thing I learned about wilderness therapy, the first day in wilderness therapy was the kids that are here are more resilient and capable than they and their parents thought they were.
Right.
That was the
I
very first
definitely,
thing.
yeah. Yep. I agree with
That's the very
that.
first thing.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing I realized is the staff that work with them are some of the most generous, gifted people in the world. To live 8 days outside with struggling teens and young adults is a heroic
Hard. Yeah. It's
effort,
hard
right? A
work.
heroic thing to do. Um, but having said all of that, for the listeners or the watchers of this through your medium, I would just say, I want every person to, I mean, my goal is for everybody to experience healing. And so for me, yeah, if you have a child that's struggling, wilderness therapy is a really great, in my opinion, the best, most provocative, effective treatment approach I've ever seen, to be honest, for most people, for many people. But start with a book, start with a podcast, start with a webinar. We have the videos online. Start with an intensive. Go and do your own work. What I think is going to be obvious in 10 years, Maureen, it's becoming more and more obvious, is that our intensive program that we call Finding You, where adults come for around 5 days to do
Right.
their own family of origin work, I think it's going to be so obvious in 10 years that everybody will be doing it, that's the greatest contribution you can make to all of your relationships,
Right.
is to work on the relationship you have with yourself. That's the essence of attachment theory, is that the problems and the solutions are in you. Yes, every parent dents their children. You cannot not dent your children. It's a part of being a human. But eventually the dents are yours to deal with. And so again, it's an invitation for everybody listening and watching to take whatever step they need towards something that can give them a new life. As Joseph Campbell talks about, we have to let go of the old life in order to find the new life that is waiting for us. That's what this is all about. It's all about transformation for everybody. Same with marital. We do couples workshops. I'm doing a multi-couple intensive in 2 weeks. It is, it's based on the relationship you have with yourself. That's really the thing that affects everything else. So it's not just about promoting Evoke Therapy Programs and our Wilderness Therapy Program, which I will do and I do believe in, but it's also saying the healing is for everybody in every context and every situation. Whatever step that you're willing to take it.
But I think it's, first and foremost, it's for yourself. And then
Yeah.
sometimes it's like you're going along and, I've been kind of traveling throughout the country to see all these different programs for the last couple of years. And then I'll realize like, wow, I still have a lot of work to do.
No kidding, right? Yeah.
I'll hear about like, this modality and this and that. I'm like, I thought I was doing okay, but I think I got some work.
I think that's what I wrote about this just the other day on social media, that every time I make it into the basement of my psyche and find out what my issues are, I find that there's another flight of stairs that goes deeper and deeper and deeper. The more I do this work, the more I realize I need this work. The more I look at myself. Just about 2 months ago, my teenage daughter, I had snapped at her about something. I forget what it was at this point. And she decided not to talk to me for half a day.
Yeah.
She got home later in the evening and I said, "Are you still not talking to me?" Very gently. And she said, "Yeah, I don't want to talk to you because you don't even know what you did." And I said, "I think I know what I did." And she said, "What?" And I told her, I said, I snapped at you. I was impatient and unkind to you. She sat down and tears filled her eyes and she said, "Yes." And I said, "You're right. I did that and I'm sorry." And then she said, "And you do it all the time." And Maureen, I did not want that to be true.
Right.
She eventually, I said, I just kept my mouth closed because I knew to do that. I wanted to defend myself and argue. She got up. She went downstairs to go to her room to go to bed. And I spent 3 minutes in my mind creating a story where what she had just said wasn't true.
Right.
And then I walked up to my
Because
wife and I
it's too
said,
painful to think if
"Yep,
that is true, that's just so painful.
yes." And I said to my wife, "I just want to run away in the mountains and hide and not hurt anybody." And then I realized that's what I'm not going to do. I'm going to stay present as a father and do my work so that when my daughter says to me, as she did, and as she will again, "This is how you hurt me," and you do it a lot, I can stay present and connected to her instead of what she most fears, which is that if she becomes herself and tells the truth to me, that I'll go away or I'll punish her.
Right.
And so the work is for all of us. The work
Right.
is for, and you're right, if you're a professional who's earnest in your work, it will become very clear to you that everything that you're teaching people is something that you need for yourself. At least that's my experience of it every day.
Right. And, like I keep referencing 12-step work, but, like I have gone through the steps a number of times. In the first time, it was like super painful. And then, a
Mhm.
lot of the step work that you do is around like, oh, I had like 99 resentments and most of them were a direct result of me.
Yeah, totally.
And, maybe the next time you do it, it's a little less painful, a little less challenging. But if you're really doing the work, you're kind of doing it like probably every year. And then maybe you have
Yeah.
resentments, maybe you have, less things that come up. But I think I kind of attribute that like to a similar process of that like healing process. And
Yeah, it's a journey.
but we're never, like in my opinion, I'm never exactly fixed. I hope that it's like, oh, I'm getting closer to that. Like I can kind of live with who I am.
I think that's it. That's so profound what you said. I can live with who I am. I say this about my therapist. I've been in psychotherapy with my current therapist that I just finished a session with because I have her just this hour every week since 1999 is when I
Oh my
started seeing her.
God, good for you. It's such a gift to be able to do that. I really do. I
Yeah.
believe it's a gift back to yourself.
And I will tell you what I thought therapy was in the beginning. It's something different now.
Right.
I thought I was going to be fixed, and now I'm trying to live with myself. And what I say about Jamie is her name is Jamie has sat beside me and with me through some ridiculous decisions, some just lots of mistakes, ignorance, all this kind of stuff. But she's done it so lovingly and patiently that now I can sit with myself and now I can sit with others. So part of the gift of the therapist is I can sit with you in your unsolvable problems and I can relate to the impossibility of this life. That's what I love about parenting specifically is there's nothing that's going to be more important to us that we will fail at more in our life. My
Totally.
my
Totally.
my young adult daughter said to me, she's finishing her Ph.D. in clinical psychology. She's gifted therapist. And she said to me in conversation, she said, "I don't know if I want to have children." She's talked about whether or not she will, and she's kind of explored it. And she said, "But I don't know." She said, "Do you think I could be a great therapist if I never had a child?" And I said, "It's possible, for sure, but the pain and the failure in your parenting teaches you something that you can't learn in other places as well because it's so important to you to get it right and you can't get it right all the time. You
Right.
will fail. And grappling with that humanity, you either develop a mental health issue, a mental health symptom to defend against it, like we talked about, because it's too painful, or
Yeah.
you learn to integrate it. And when you learn to do that integration work, that's when you are available then for everybody else's healing, everybody else in the world.
Right. Right. And going through, I mean, you have 4 kids, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have two, and we've, definitely had some ups and downs, and a lot of the learning challenges and the,
Sure.
institutions and, you know, the whole gamut of
Everything.
it. And to the point where it was like, I don't think I can get through this. I really
Yeah.
don't. And and it's like I would just keep showing up and doing it day in, day out, and learning the ins and outs of like, okay, this is how we do it. And then I would feel almost like as a, like in AA, we call it like an AA thief. It's like something that was so freely given to me that I can't turn around and give back. And so I spend
Right.
most of my life trying to give back what was freely given to me, or that I learned on my own through like obsessive research. And then I just turn around and I give it back freely. Because, I think that that's what makes me like a compassionate human being. Like I
You
just don't
know,
want anyone to have to continue to suffer if I can help.
one of my very favorite movies of all time. It's a movie about Joseph Campbell, who I really love the work of Joseph Campbell. He's a person who studied myth. Um, One of my favorite movies is called Finding Joe, and you can get it on YouTube, or you can buy it on Apple for a few bucks also, or get it for free on YouTube. But there's several celebrities on there, and one of the celebrities that's talking is he won the Academy Award for a movie for writing a screenplay. A Beautiful Mind is what it was actually, and he talks about how he was sexually abused as a child, severely over a long period of time. He said, I don't share this in a lot of contexts, but in this context, it's appropriate. He said, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But he said, from that experience, I have something, I have a gift from it, and that is I have compassion for others. I get high marks on empathy and compassion for others. And so I think that's what our therapy can do. It can take our wounding and our trauma, and it can expose the gift in it. And that's what you're describing, that wanting to give back the thing that was given to you. That's what I talk about in therapy with me. When I have a client say to me, oh my gosh, you've helped me, I say, I'm just trying to do something for you that somebody did for me. I love AA because you walk in there knowing that you are a dirty, rotten alcoholic, and
Right.
you have the courage to confess or tell a story about yourself. And the old timer says, you're in the right place. Sit next to me. You belong.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's the healing. That's why when people talk about experiential therapy, which we promote and utilize, I try to teach therapists that the experiential part of therapy is the way that the client feels around the therapist about themselves. How the client feels about themselves when they're around you, that's the experience. Because in parenting, as you know, we're so afraid. We have our own stuff that comes up. We're limited human beings. Our frustration, our disappointment, our sadness, our fear and anxiety leak onto and into the child, and their experience around us is something's wrong with them. But when you have a therapist who's containing and holding you, you start to have the feeling like, I'm okay. Same with AA, like, okay, I'm a drunk, but I'm lovable and I'm worthwhile and my life matters. I
Exactly.
love
Yeah, exactly. Um, so I really appreciate your time today, and I can't wait to get to the audacity to be you. I'm learning so much just through your writing. Again, it's really around this like, I'm embarrassed to say, like, just carrying around this shame for so
yeah,
long, like growing up in an alcoholic home, blah, 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 blah. It's like,
right.
it's all okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
And
yes.
I'm an imperfect parent, but I'm doing like the best I can.
Hmm.
And so I loved reading your first book. I want to get into the next one. And I just so appreciate the time that you took today. And I'm hoping that I can come out and visit soon. But thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, my honor.